Edward Gibbon Fall of Rome Part 7. In the previous video, we discussed the events that led to the period that ancient historians of Rome call the crisis of the 3rd century. During this era, there was a long line of emperors from the assassination of Alexander Severus in 235 until the rise of Diocletian to power in 284. Many of them were elevated to the position of emperor and then killed by the Praetorian Guards or the legions. The crisis of the 3rd century represented the culmination of the role of the army in the Roman politics. In Gibbon's view of the Augustus regime, it was the prestige of the Senate that served as a shield between the emperor and the army. With the political decline of the Senate and the emergence of emperors from outside Rome and in the provinces, the role of the army changed from protecting the emperor to making emperors. According to Gibbon's argument, the crisis of the 3rd century was basically a crisis of political legitimacy. After Augustus, the emperors derived their legitimacy from both the Senate and the army. Once the role and power of the army were expanded, the Praetorian Guard and then the legions learned that they could withdraw their support for the legitimacy of any emperor at any time by strengthening the army, proving that someone outside Rome could become emperor, and linking his legitimacy to the army and not to the Senate. Severus completely disrupted the balance that Augustus had established between the army and the Senate. During the crisis of the 3rd century, the Senate and the army were competing in an attempt to raise their own candidates for the position of emperor. This problem of legitimacy was never solved until Diocletian reinvented the position of emperor himself, completely eliminated the remnants of the republic from the imperial office, and made the emperor a semi-divine king. Another major work Gibbon presented was the influence of the inhabitants of the provinces. According to Gibbon's own ideas, the traditional Roman West versus the corrupt East, the increasing representation of the provincial population in the army and government administration weakened what Gibbon considered the innate virtues of the Romans. From his point of view, Rome was mixed with millions of diverse inhabitants from the servant counties who received the name without adopting the spirit of the Romans. In this sense, the Roman Empire was a victim of its success. From Gibbon's point of view, practices such as deifying the emperors spread to Italy from the provincial population, as well as political authoritarianism. When writing about the Persian Empire, Gibbon further linked his image of the East to religion and superstition, describing the Sassanid elites of Persia as living in the bosom of prosperity and tyranny. For Gibbon, Persian Zoroastrianism was a prime example of how religion could be corrupted by the priests, or what Gibbon called superstition. Religion was capable of being socially useful and at its best when it serves this purpose, which Gibbon portrayed in Zoroastrianism in the first centuries. However, once the Zoroastrianism began to host a wealthy priesthood and develop superstitious rituals and beliefs that increased the power and wealth of the priesthood, it became corrupt. Although Gibbon did not approve of the persecutions that took place under Zoroastrianism during the Sassanid period, he admitted that Zoroastrianism served the purpose of uniting the Persians behind their empire with religious zeal. Gibbon's assumptions about how religion is corrupted by superstition and how religion is used as a social tool are similar to his ideas about Roman paganism, Judaism, and Christianity. Gibbon moves on to talk about another enemy of the Romans, the Germanic peoples. Gibbon believed that the Germanic tribes spread to modern Germany, Scandinavia, and most of Poland. It is also suspected that the cold climate in Germany made the Germanic peoples stronger and taller than the Mediterranean peoples. Tacitus, a Roman historian who wrote extensively about the Germanic people, mentioned that they were illiterate without an alphabet and they had no currency or cities. According to Gibbon, the ancient Germanics lived their lives in a state of ignorance and poverty, which some writers preferred to glorify as virtuous simplicity. However, they practiced some agriculture, including beer production. One of the benefits that the Germanics got from the lack of civilization was the enjoyment of freedom. Gibbon attributes this to the fact that property and the desire for luxury are what lead to tyranny. As far as government was concerned, the Germanics people organized themselves into tribes whose members voted on political decisions and leaders. During war and danger, the Germanic tribes would choose a commander-in-chief, but the tribes would also choose princes based on their merits and noble lineage. Their tasks included settling disputes and legal issues. However, Gibbon claims that the Germanic commoners often resisted the authority of their leaders. As for religion, oral stories, and songs narrated by the Germanics people, they glorified the fighting and promised either reincarnation or a paradise full of wine after death. Since the Germanics people were usually organized into tribes, they usually did not pose a threat. But if they organize themselves into a larger union, they become a threat to the Roman Empire, as happened in the time of Marcus Aurelius. Gibbon mentioned that after the games celebrated by Philip the Arab, there were 20 years of shame and misery that had assassinations for many emperors. This matter weakened the emperor's legitimacy in the eyes of the people and proved that the army could make anyone an emperor. Soon a legion rebelled against Philip, and in a desperate attempt, Philip sent a senator Decius to negotiate with rebel soldiers, but Decius overturned and was proclaimed emperor by that legion. Philip died either in battle or was assassinated. During Alexander Severus' rule, a Germanic tribe possibly from Scandinavia called the Goths began to threaten the province of Dacia. The Goths were organized around a royal dynasty and began to settle in what is today Poland, Russia, and Ukraine. When the Goths, led by their king Cneva, crossed the empire's borders into modern Bulgaria, Decius led an army to fight them. Despite the crushing defeat, Decius managed to drive out the Goths and strengthened Rome's defenses along the Danube. Decius began reforms, reviving the position of the sergeant who was responsible for public morality. But Gibbon points out that this did not improve Decius' chances as he was killed in battle against the Goths. The Senate granted the position of emperor to Gallus, who paid tribute to the Goths as part of the peace negotiations. This was the first time Rome paid tribute in centuries. Gallus's peace treaty with the Goths encouraged other tribes to try to invade the Roman Empire. Gallus fought with his son Volusianus against another usurper named Aemilianus. Aemilianus was defeated by Valerian, who was appointed by Gallus as sergeant. Valerian and his son Gallienus proclaimed themselves as co-emperor at a time when the empire was threatened by three Germanic tribes, the Franks, the Alemanni, the Goths, and also the Persians. The Franks looted the provinces of Gaul and Spain. Gallienus led an army to save northern Italy from the Alemanni. The Goths established a naval force that launched raids around Turkey and modern Greece. At the same time, the Persians were able to install their candidate as king of Armenia, the ancient Roman ally, and they crossed the Roman borders at the Euphrates River. Valerian fought the Persians in Syria, but the emperor was defeated and captured. After their victory, the Persians plundered the main city of Antioch in Syria and other rich cities in the region. The Persian king Shapur was only defeated by Senator Odenathus of Palmyra. Gibbon points out that the Persian conquered Rome protection came at the hands of a Syrian or an Arab from Palmyra. Gibbon underestimates the story of ancient sources claiming that Valerian was used as a footstand by Shapur, or that his body was stuffed and preserved in a Persian temple. But he says it is at least certain that he is the only emperor of Rome who fell into the hands of the enemy and spent the rest of his life in miserable captivity. To be continued. Thank you for watching.